crowded waiting area of a Boston City bus station, a dark winter evening, with a bone-chilling wind biting at the skin. A woman about 7 months pregnant was huddled on the end bench, her face pale, eyes red-rimmed with exhaustion. Passers-by glanced at her, but no one stopped. Some even muttered under their breath, "Another foolish young woman." She tried to stand, but her legs trembled before collapsing back onto the bench, a sharp pain making her clutch her stomach. Just then, Daniel, a dedicated single dad, walked past. He saw everything. Without hesitation, he pulled a chair to her side, sat down, draped his coat over her shoulders, and spoke gently. "It's okay. I'm here now." Daniel Carter, 38, was a man forged by responsibility. After losing his wife several years prior, he became the sole pillar for his daughter, Lily. He worked 2 strenuous jobs, a delivery driver and a handyman, a constant cycle of commutes and late hours, fueled by instant coffee and the promise of Lily's smile. Lily, 7, was the only light, the motivation that helped him push past the exhaustion. He always taught her, when you see someone struggling, you must stop. Kindness doesn't need to be loud, but it does need to be absolute. That evening, the biting cold of a Boston December had settled over the city streets. Daniel had just completed his last delivery run and was walking with Lily toward the bus stop to head home. They passed a dimly lit corner of the waiting area. Lily, her small hand tightly gripping his, tugged lightly on his coat, her voice laced with worry. "Daddy, why is that lady crying so quietly? Is she cold?" Daniel followed his daughter's gaze. A pregnant woman, huddled over, clutching her stomach, and visibly shaking from the cold. Her thin, frayed jacket offered little protection. Daniel heard a nearby man scoff to his partner. "Look at that! Couldn't even manage her life. That's what you get." Another woman sneered, confirming the cold indifference Daniel had sensed. "A nuisance. We all have problems. She brought this one on herself." A silent fury rose in Daniel. He couldn't abide by such indifference. He gently told his daughter, his eyes determined and soft, "Stay right here, honey. Hold your bag. I'll be right back. I need to go listen to someone who needs to be heard." Daniel walked quickly toward the young woman. He didn't stomp or rush. His movement was deliberate, signaling respect. The woman was trying desperately to get up, managing only a slight shift before collapsing back onto the bench, the strain and pain making her bite her lip. Daniel didn't sit directly on the bench. Instead, he smoothly pulled a heavy, unused plastic chair from a corner, placed it next to her, and sat down. He wanted to speak to her at eye level. "Are you okay? Can I help you?" She startled violently, looking up. Her red, tired eyes met his with a guarded, fearful look. She tried to say, I'm fine. Leave me alone." But her voice was weak and trembling, betraying her lie. Daniel remained gentle but firm. "Your body is shaking. Are you in pain? Do you need warmth? Do you need anything at all?" She gasped, her face sickly pale and etched with exhaustion. I have severe cramps. Since the afternoon. I haven't eaten anything substantial since early lunch." Immediately, Daniel took off his thick, dark blue winter coat and draped it over her shoulders. The sudden, intense warmth made Arya flinch. It had been months since she felt such encompassing warmth. "Why didn't you ask someone for help, Arya?" Daniel asked, having noticed the name Arya subtly embroidered on the worn edge of her thin scarf. His voice was entirely devoid of judgment. She lowered her head, fighting back tears. "No one wants to hear someone like me. They only see a problem, a failure. They only see a nuisance." Daniel replied slowly, every word carrying the weight of respect and conviction. "Well, I am listening now." Arya fell silent, on the verge of tears because of the simple power of those 3 words. Daniel glanced back at Lily, who was watching intently, and gave her a slight signal. Lily understood and quickly walked to a small vending kiosk, purchased a cracker pack and a bottle of room-temperature water. Lily placed the cracker carefully in Arya's hand, her small face serious. "Please eat, ma'am. You're feeding a baby. My daddy says babies need strong mommies. You need to be strong." The woman Arya managed to take a small bite. Daniel observed her. She was gaunt, her lips faintly blue with cold, her shoes ragged. Do you need to go to the hospital? I can take you right now. Don't worry about the cost, we'll figure it out. She shook her head vigorously, a sudden look of panic replacing the exhaustion in her eyes. No, I don't have money for that. And I don't want anyone to know where I am. They will take me back to my family. Daniel sensed that this was a desperate flight from control. He didn't pry. He simply said gently, I'm not asking about your past. I just want to help your present. Please focus on eating and drinking some water first. We can talk about next steps later. Arya finally broke down crying, the dam of accumulated stress collapsing. The tears were not from the physical pain, but because for the first time in months, she was treated with unearned kindness and dignity. A young man nearby who was scrolling on his phone stopped, talking quietly to his friend. Did you see that? I've never seen anyone treat a stranger in need with such patience and calm. That dad is truly something else. After a few minutes, Arya had calmed down significantly, the simple cracker and water having provided a momentary lift. Daniel remained seated beside her, his hands gently holding the edges of his coat to ensure it didn't slip off her shoulders. A subtle, thoughtful, protective gesture. She spoke softly, her voice catching on every syllable. My name is Arya. Thank you, Daniel. Daniel nodded, a warm, genuine smile spreading across his face. It's a real pleasure to meet you, Arya. I'm Daniel, and this is Lily. Arya looked straight at him, her eyes conveying skepticism and a yearning for belief. No one has said pleasure to meet you to me in a long time. They usually just ask me when I'm leaving. He listened, offering non-judgmental silence. Exactly what she needed. After a long moment, Arya couldn't hold the burden in any longer. The pain, the humiliation, and the absolute loneliness that had accumulated over many months poured out, whispered into the semi-darkness of the bus station. My boyfriend abandoned me the moment he found out I was pregnant. He was furious. He shouted that I had ruined his career and future. He pressured me constantly, hysterically, to terminate the pregnancy, claiming this child was an obstacle, a mistake. Arya clutched her stomach tightly, instinctively protecting the baby from the memory. When I refused, he just packed and disappeared. He changed his number and vanished as if I never existed. The emotional wound of the abandonment was still raw. My family, they are very traditional, very conservative. They didn't accept it. My parents said I was a disgrace. My father told me, you have made your bed, now lie in it alone. I had to leave home immediately, cut off all ties, and find the cheapest, dampest room I could afford. I have nothing left, Daniel. I only have this baby, and a constant fear that I am not enough for him. Daniel didn't offer empty platitudes. In that moment, he vividly recalled the feeling of standing alone, holding Lily's hand, the sudden, brutal severance of all support. He could see that Arya wasn't just physically exhausted, she was emotionally decimated by the vacuum of love and acceptance. I found a job as a convenience store clerk near the harbor. I tried so hard to stand for 8 hours, ignoring the searing back pain, ignoring the dizziness. But today was too much. The manager fired me immediately because I couldn't stand up anymore. I fainted right at the counter during the evening rush. I have nowhere to go. I've been walking all day, from my expired cheap rental to here, to find a bench that wouldn't make me move. She held her abdomen, her voice trembling, dissolving into a whisper. I'm scared, Daniel. I'm scared my child will be abandoned, just like me. I'm scared I won't be strong enough to keep him safe and warm. I don't know how to fight this alone anymore. Daniel's response was slow and steady, his eyes conveying deep personal empathy. No one deserves to be abandoned, Arya. Neither you nor this baby. The pain you carry, the fight you are waging just to keep this child, that takes an immense amount of strength. More strength than any of those people who judged you. Arya turned to look at him, and for the first time in months, her eyes held a flicker of hope. She felt a genuine connection, not an act of charity. Lily, who had been listening quietly, moved closer and leaned gently against Arya's side, a small, silent hug of solidarity. The little girl whispered, her voice full of determined innocence. "Don't be scared, Miss Arya. My dad is very strong. He fixed the neighbor's broken fridge in the snow. He can keep you safe." Arya managed a slight smile through her tears, accepting the innocent comfort. It was the first honest, unforced smile she'd worn in too long. Daniel asked, "Would you consider going to a proper women's shelter? They offer decent medical and social support?" Arya shook her head firmly. "I went once when I first left, but a family acquaintance who volunteers there saw me. I don't want to be forced back home. If I'm made to return, they will force me to give up my child for adoption. I can't let that happen." Daniel went silent. He looked at her matted hair, her cold hands clutching her belly, the deep, anemic look of her skin. She couldn't handle another hour out in the severe cold. He made a bold decision, one that went against every personal safety rule he had adopted since becoming a single father. "Tonight you are not going anywhere but home," Daniel stated, his voice brooking no argument. "You need a warm place, a meal, and rest. You are coming to my house. Lily and I have a spare room, small but warm." Arya was utterly shocked, protesting weakly. "No, I can't impose on you. You barely know me." "It's not imposing, Arya," Daniel countered firmly, looking her straight in the eyes. "It is helping a future mother and child survive. You cannot fight this cold and hunger alone in this condition. You need to be safe immediately." Arya trembled, her resistance crumbling. "Why are you being so kind? Aren't you afraid I'll be trouble?" Daniel looked at her, his gaze reaching the deepest part of her heart. "Because I know what it feels like to lose everything, to be abandoned, and to have to get back up alone. I won't let you and this baby go through that. Not tonight." Arya couldn't stop the torrent of tears that followed. That sentence, "I know what it feels like to lose everything," was a profound, life-saving command of genuine compassion. An elderly woman on the opposite bench, who had been watching the entire silent drama unfold, slowly got up, approached Daniel, and held his hand briefly, tears in her own eyes. She whispered, "If my daughter had met a man like you, maybe her life would have been different. Thank you, young man. Go on, be her miracle." Just as Daniel was preparing to help Arya and Lily onto the bus to his home, Arya suddenly let out a strangled cry and clutched her abdomen, her face turning a ghastly shade of clinical white. The change was instant and terrifying. "No, it hurts so much. It's burning, like fire inside." Daniel reacted instantly, the panic transforming into focused, immediate action. He saw her eyes roll back slightly. He caught her as she collapsed for the second time, but this time the pain made her writhe in his arms. "Arya, can you hear me? Focus on my voice. Try to breathe deeply, Arya." She gasped, cold sweat instantly dampening his coat around her neck. "I'm scared, Daniel. I'm scared of losing my baby. Please don't let it happen." Daniel instinctively scooped her up, lifting her into his arms. Arya's body felt terrifyingly light, too frail for a woman carrying a child. He carried her like a fragile package, ignoring the sudden, collective gasp and stares of the crowd, ignoring the piercing cold, the fierce, protective instinct of a father, and the agonizing memory of loss surged within him, giving him strength. "Lily, stay close! We're going to the hospital," he announced, his voice ringing with a powerful, non-negotiable authority. "Right now. No discussion." Arya cried weakly into his chest. "I don't have any insurance. No money. Daniel, please, put me down." "You have me," he answered curtly, his breath misting in the cold air as he ran toward the main road to flag a taxi. He thought, "I don't care if I empty my savings. She is not going to lose this baby." Lily ran behind, clutching her father's bag, crying and calling out, "Don't be scared, Miss Arya. Daddy is taking us to the hospital. We're going to be okay." At the hospital, the emergency room was a blur of flashing lights and swift action. Daniel's insistence and Arya's visibly critical state prompted immediate attention. A doctor examined her quickly, his expression darkening with every observation. "It's not premature labor yet, but the danger is imminent. the doctor explained gravely to Daniel outside the curtain. The patient is severely debilitated, critically anemic, and her body utterly lacks the strength and reserves to safely sustain the pregnancy. The cramping is her body protesting. If she had delayed seeking care just a few more hours, both mother and baby would be in grave, life-threatening danger. She needs high-dose fluids, immediate nutrient infusion, and round-the-clock, total monitoring. She cannot be left alone. Aria lay in the sterile, quiet hospital bed, now hooked up to several IV lines. Her hand was clutching Daniel's, her eyes never leaving his face, fear replaced by a bewildered sense of relief. "I'm so sorry. I didn't want to cause you this much trouble, Daniel," Aria whispered, her voice barely audible over the slow drip of the IV bag. "I have nothing to repay you with." "Stop talking like that," Daniel commanded gently, his thumb rubbing soothing circles on the back of her hand. "You are not trouble, Aria. You are fighting for your child's life with everything you have. Let me help you win this fight. I consider myself lucky to be here." After Aria was stabilized and resting, the doctor spoke privately with Daniel again, his expression professional and serious. "The social worker will be here shortly, but I must be clear," the doctor stated gravely. "She has zero family support. If she returns to the level of stress and exhaustion she was under, the risk of fatal complications is extremely high. She needs an absolutely stable, warm, supportive environment for the next 2 months minimum." Daniel returned. Aria looked at him, silently begging him not to leave. She whispered, her voice filled with despair. "I've lived like a ghost for 7 months. No one stood by me. Every person I cared about pushed me away because of this child." Daniel sat down, leaning close. He took her frail hand into his strong, steady one. He didn't just speak the words, he consciously traced the outline of his hand on the back of hers, touching each nerve ending, transmitting a deliberate, foundational message of safety. "I am here." 3 simple words, yet they held the weight of a solemn, unshakable promise. They represented unconditional acceptance and a definitive end to her solitude. Aria burst into uncontrollable sobs, not of pain, but of catharsis, like a long-forgotten child, finally found and embraced in a way she desperately needed. Once Aria drifted into a medicated sleep, Daniel took Lily home, made sure she was settled with a bowl of soup and a bedtime story, and immediately returned to the hospital. He sat by her bedside the entire night, reading an old dog-eared paperback, his coat still draped over the chair back, a silent, protective symbol of the vow he had made at the bus stop. In the early morning, when Aria woke up, she saw Daniel fast asleep, slumped awkwardly in the hard chair beside the edge of her bed, his hand still loosely holding hers, a posture of perfect vigilance. The faint morning light filtered through the window, highlighting the exhaustion, but also the deep peace on his face. She called his name with a weak, choked voice. "Daniel!" He started awake immediately, quickly adjusting his posture, instantly alert. Aria gathered all her courage, speaking the words she had buried deep in her heart for months, words that felt too vulnerable to admit. I used to lie in my cold room and just wish I had a man like you in my life. Someone who wouldn't abandon me when I needed them most. Someone who would just show up." Daniel looked up, his eyes not surprised, only infinitely tender and steady. "You don't have to wish anymore. Now you do." Aria trembled. "You don't know my past, the foolish mistakes I made, the reasons they cast me out." "I don't need to know every detail of your past, Aria," Daniel interrupted, his voice deep, certain, and utterly dismissive of judgment. "All I need to know is that right now, you are a brave woman who is fighting to protect her child, and you deserve to be loved, protected, and fought for." That statement shattered every final emotional defense in Aria's heart. It wasn't just forgiveness. It was absolute, unconditional acceptance. The night shift nurse, finishing her documentation, wrote a final note in the patient's chart. "The man sat by her bedside for 9 hours without leaving, without a single complaint, and with deep respect. She is clinically stable. I believe she has found someone real, someone who will never leave her behind. Recommendation: extreme supportive environment. After being discharged from the hospital 3 days later, Arya moved into Daniel's small, cozy house under the doctor's strong recommendation and Daniel's meticulous arrangement. Daniel turned his silent vow, "I am here," into daily reality. Lily was the most thrilled. "I have a playmate. Ms. Arya is here, and when the baby is born, we'll have a whole team. We can play dress-up and read stories." Daniel had quickly converted the small guest room into a cozy private bedroom for Arya, ensuring peaceful rest. He bought comfortable maternity clothes, made sure she had a heating pad for her back, and meticulously prepared nutrient-rich breakfasts, setting a reminder to ensure she took her prenatal vitamins exactly on time. For the first time, Arya experienced selfless care, without a single expectation of anything in return. The warmth of the house seemed to penetrate the cold core of her despair. Arya, despite her advanced pregnancy and the doctor's rest orders, didn't sit idle. She helped Daniel fold laundry, cook simple but hearty meals using the fresh ingredients Daniel brought home, and played games with Lily, reading to her, helping her with homework. It felt like finding a long-lost, perfect-fitting family. It was a place where she could just be herself, rest when she needed to, and contribute without fear of judgment. One evening, after Lily was asleep following a long story session, Daniel sat with Arya on the small front porch swing, a quiet calm enveloping the house. The winter night was clear, the cold air crisp. Daniel asked, his voice low and full of genuine concern, "Arya, I scheduled you for a regular prenatal checkup next Tuesday. Would you like to go?" She nodded slowly, tears welling up immediately. "It's the first time anyone has asked me that question with such genuine excitement. The first time someone wanted to go with me, instead of hiding me away." A week later, at the clinic, when the doctor turned on the ultrasound screen, Arya's heart almost stopped. She saw the tiny, distinct form of her baby moving, kicking gently, its strong heart beating rapidly on the monitor. She burst into quiet sobs, not of pain or fear, but of the overwhelming, miraculous reality of life. "That's my baby," Arya whispered, hardly believing her eyes as Daniel squeezed her hand. Daniel's eyes were shining with paternal pride, though the baby wasn't his by blood. He held her gaze firmly. "And he is already a part of our family, Arya, a new member of the team." Arya turned to him, her face wet with tears that seemed to wash away months of hardship. "Family? If you allow it, then yes," Daniel replied with an earnest, direct look. She cried harder, but these were tears of utter relief and joy, of finally being truly accepted and loved into a structure she thought she'd ruined forever. That same evening, Arya and Daniel sat on the front steps, sharing a thick woolen blanket, watching the stars. She spoke slowly, as if afraid to break the delicate, newfound peace. "I always thought I wasn't worthy of love, Daniel. I thought I'd lost all my chances for happiness when I got pregnant and was rejected by everyone." Daniel turned to face her fully, pulling the blanket tighter around both of them. "It's not that you weren't worthy of love, Arya. You simply met the wrong person who chose fear and selfishness, and your family chose tradition over compassion. That says everything about them, not you." Arya looked at him for a long time, her eyes asking an unspoken question that went deeper than words. Daniel gently took her hand, his thumb tracing the line of her wedding finger. "And now you've met the right person, and both of us have found a safe, warm place to stop running and start living together. From today, I choose to look at each other for more than just a beat. I will choose kindness." 3 months later, on a crisp morning in March, Arya went into labor. The journey to the hospital was filled with a mix of fear and excitement. Daniel paced outside the delivery room, more nervous and shaken than any groom on his wedding day. Lily, sitting patiently in the waiting room with a large sketchbook, tightly clutching a stuffed toy Daniel had won her, repeatedly asked the nurse, "When will my little brother or sister be born? I need to know if I should draw a superhero or a princess." Finally, after hours of anxious waiting, a nurse brought out a healthy, handsome baby boy, swaddled tightly. Lily shouted with pure joy, carefully hugging her little brother. It's my little brother. He's so small. We should call him Leo. Daniel entered the room, his eyes immediately finding Arya. She was exhausted but smiling faintly and radiantly. Her face no longer held the desperate pallor of the bus station, but the beautiful glow of fulfilled motherhood and quiet happiness. Thank you, Daniel. Thank you for staying, Arya whispered, her voice still shaky from the effort. For what? Daniel asked, leaning in close, brushing the damp hair from her forehead. For pulling my baby and me out of the darkness. You didn't just save us from the cold, but from utter loneliness. You gave me a second life, and my son a fighting chance. Daniel gently placed baby Leo into Arya's arms, letting the two connect, then knelt beside her bed, ignoring the hard floor. His eyes were fixed entirely on her, then the newborn, then back to her. Arya, may I ask you something that can't wait? She looked at him, her heart pounding from the intensity in his gaze. What is it, Daniel? After everything, what could it be? Daniel took her hand, not the tired hand that had clung to his for help, but the hand that now cradled their son. His voice was soft but firm and deeply clear. I don't want to be just the person who helped you. I don't want to be a friend or a caretaker or a roommate. I want to be the person who walks alongside you for every single day to come, who raises Leo with you, who is an official parent to Lily with you. I want to be your family. Officially, Arya burst into tears, happy tears she couldn't hold back. She looked at the simple, quiet determination in Daniel's eyes. Are you proposing marriage to me, Daniel Carter? Daniel smiled, the most radiant, relieved smile she had ever seen. If you agree to legally and officially become my family, then yes, Arya, I am. Marry me. Let's build this life we stumbled into, properly. Arya nodded continuously, happy tears falling onto the sleeping baby's face. Yes, 1,000 times yes, Daniel. I love you. I love our family. Lily, sensing the mood, rushed into the room, saw the tears, and instantly jumped up and down with excitement. I have a little brother and a new mommy. Daddy promised. We're an official team. All four embraced, Daniel, Arya, Lily, and newborn Leo, a new family formed, not by blood or initial attraction, but by kindness, patience, radical acceptance, and the unconditional love that truly heals every wound. If you believe stories about second chances, the true meaning of strength and unconditional love deserve to be told, leave a comment and subscribe. We tell the stories that shouldn't be forgotten.